David Morrison sat in his mahogany-paneled study, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the Persian rug. His hands trembled slightly as he held the white envelope marked with the familiar blue logo of Heritage DNA Services. For weeks, he had convinced himself this was just a fun anniversary gift, something light and interesting to share with Emma after 30 years of marriage. Now, staring at the sealed results, an unexplainable dread settled in his stomach. Emma was in the garden, tending to her prized roses, completely unaware that their carefully constructed life was about to change. David could see her through the window. Her graying hair pulled back in the same style she had worn since they first met at university. She moved with the grace that had first captured his attention all those years ago. But today, watching her felt different. Today, he was about to open a door that perhaps should have remained closed. The idea had come from their daughter Sophie, who had taken a DNA test 6 months earlier. She discovered she was 12% Scandinavian, which delighted her immensely. "You should do it too, Mom and Dad," she had urged during Sunday dinner. "It's fascinating to learn about your ancestry." Emma had laughed, saying she already knew everything she needed to know about her family. Her parents, Margaret and Thomas Whitfield, had raised her in a small cottage in Devon. Her lineage was simple, unremarkable, and thoroughly English. But David had persisted, partly out of curiosity and partly because he loved surprising Emma. He ordered 2 kits, and they had spent an evening laughing as they swabbed their cheeks and sealed the samples. Emma had humored him, though she maintained it was a waste of money. "What secrets could possibly be hiding in our DNA?" she had joked. "I'm afraid you'll be terribly disappointed when it confirms I'm exactly who I've always said I am." Now, 6 weeks later, David wasn't so sure. The company had sent 2 separate emails, one confirming his results were ready, and another marked, "Important. Please read before viewing results," regarding Emma's test. The second email had kept him awake for 3 nights. It contained carefully worded warnings about unexpected discoveries and family connections that may require sensitive handling. They offered counseling services and suggested having support systems in place. Before viewing the results, David's own results had been predictably boring. 60% British, 20% Irish, 15% German, and 5% broadly Northwestern European. No surprises, no scandals, just the genetic confirmation of what his family records had always shown. But Emma's envelope remained sealed, waiting like a ticking bomb on his desk. He thought about their life together, the struggles of their early marriage when money was tight, the joy of Sophie's birth after years of trying, the comfortable rhythm they had settled into over the decades. Emma had built a successful interior design business, while he had climbed the corporate ladder at a London investment firm. They had weathered his father's death, her mother's battle with cancer, and the usual storms that test any long marriage. Through it all, Emma had been his anchor, steady and unchanging. The peculiar thing was how little Emma actually knew about her extended family. Her parents had been older when they had her. Her mother was 43, her father 50. They had told her she was their miracle baby, born after years of disappointment. Both had been only children themselves, or so they claimed, leaving Emma with no aunts, uncles, or cousins. When David had first met Emma's parents, he had found them oddly evasive about their past. They deflected questions about family history with vague comments about records being lost during the war. Margaret Whitfield had been particularly adamant that the past should remain buried. "Some things are better left alone," she would say whenever Emma expressed curiosity about her grandparents. "We're your family. That's all that matters." Thomas would nod in agreement, quickly changing the subject to safer ground. They had both died within a year of each other when Sophie was 10. Taking whatever secrets they harbored to their graves, David picked up the envelope again, running his finger along the sealed edge. He could simply throw it away, claim the results had been lost or inconclusive. Emma would never know. She hadn't wanted the test in the first place, but the weight of the unknown pressed down on him. What if there was important medical information? What if there were genetic conditions Sophie should know about? His rational mind tried to justify opening it, while his heart warned him that some knowledge came with a price. The front door opened, and he heard Emma's footsteps in the hallway. She was humming something, a habit she had when she was particularly content. "David? Are you home?" she called out. He quickly slid the envelope into his desk drawer, his heart racing like a teenager caught with contraband. "In the study," he managed to reply, his voice sounding strange even to his own ears. Emma appeared in the doorway, her cheeks flushed from the garden, a smudge of dirt on her forehead. "The roses are absolutely gorgeous this year," she said, smiling. "You should come see them." She paused, studying his face with the intuition born from 3 decades of marriage. "Is everything all right? You look pale." David forced a smile, standing up from his desk. "Just work stuff," he lied, the envelope burning like a guilty secret in the drawer. "Let me go see these prize-winning roses of yours." As he followed her back to the garden, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking through the last normal moments of their life together. The DNA results waited in the drawer like a patient predator, ready to pounce when he finally found the courage to face whatever truth they contained. 3 days passed before David found himself alone with the envelope again. Emma had gone to London for a client meeting, and Sophie was at her flat in Camden. The house felt unnaturally quiet, as if holding its breath for what was to come. David poured himself a generous glass of whiskey, Dutch courage, his father would have called it, and sat back down at his desk. The envelope opened easily, too easily, as if it had been waiting for this moment. Inside were several pages of reports, charts, and technical information. David's eyes scanned the ethnic breakdown. First, 40% Ashkenazi Jewish, 30% Eastern European, 20% German, 10% Irish. He read it again, certain he had misunderstood. Emma, whose parents had been pillars of their Anglican church, whose mother had traced their family back to Tudor England, was nearly half Jewish. But it was the second page that made his blood run cold. Under a section titled, "Close Family Matches," there was a name. Sarah Goldstein. Relationship. Half-sister. Shared DNA. 25%. Below that, another entry. Michael Goldstein. Relationship. Half-brother. Shared DNA. 24%. And below that, 6 more names, all listed as half-siblings, all sharing between 23% and 26% of Emma's DNA. David's mind reeled. Half-siblings meant they shared one parent. 8 half-siblings suggested something far more complex than a simple affair or previous marriage. He clicked on the first profile. Sarah Goldstein. Aged 52. Living in Manchester. Her profile message was brief but loaded with meaning. Looking for answers about my biological father. Born 1971. Adopted at birth. Have connected with several half-siblings through this site. If you're reading this, we probably share more than DNA. Please reach out. The whiskey burned his throat as David processed what he was reading. Emma was 55. Sarah was 52. Michael's profile showed he was 54. The ages were all clustered within a decade. His hands shook as he clicked through more profiles. Rachel, 51. Also adopted. David, 53, raised by a single mother who refused to name his father. Rebecca, 49, the youngest, who had uploaded a message that made David's heart ache. My mother passed last year. Before she died, she told me my father was a doctor who helped couples who couldn't have children. She said he was a good man, who gave desperate people hope. I just want to know who I am. The implications crashed over David like a cold wave. Emma wasn't Margaret and Thomas Whitfield's biological daughter. The older parents, the miracle baby story, the absence of extended family, it all made horrible sense. But how could they have hidden this? And who was Emma's biological father who had fathered at least 9 children? David found himself clicking on a link to message boards where Emma's half-siblings had been piecing together their story. The posts went back 2 years. Sarah Goldstein had been the first to discover the connection, followed quickly by Michael. They had created a private Facebook group, sharing photos and information. The resemblances were undeniable: the same green eyes Emma had, the distinctive nose shape, The way they all seemed to smile with one corner of their mouth slightly higher than the other. The most recent post was from Michael, dated just a week ago. "I've hired a private investigator. We have a right to know who our father was and why he had so many children. I've found 3 more half-siblings who haven't joined the group yet. Their profiles are set to private. One of them is in London. Emma Morrison. If you're reading this, you're not alone. We're your family too." David stared at the screen, his mind racing through 30 years of memories. Emma's panic attacks that started in her 30s, which her therapist had said might be related to suppressed trauma. Her mother's final words in the hospital. Delirious with morphine, mumbling about protecting her and keeping the secret. Thomas Whitfield's insistence on cremation, despite Emma's wishes to have her parents buried. The sound of car tires on gravel jolted David from his thoughts. Emma was home early. Panicked, he printed the pages, closed the browser, and shoved everything back in the drawer. By the time she entered the study, he was pretending to review investment portfolios. "The client canceled," Emma announced, looking annoyed. "Drove all the way to London for nothing." She paused, studying him. "David, what's wrong?" "You've been acting strange all week." He looked at his wife, the woman he loved, the mother of his child, the person he had built his life with, and saw her differently, not as Emma Whitfield Morrison, but as Emma someone. A woman who didn't know her own story. The weight of the secret pressed against his chest, demanding to be shared. "The DNA results came," he heard himself say, the words hanging in the air between them like a challenge. Emma's face went through a series of expressions: surprise, curiosity. Then a flash of something that looked almost like fear. "Oh," she said quietly. "And? Mine were boring, exactly what we expected." He paused, watching her relax slightly. "Yours were more complicated." The color drained from Emma's face. She sank into the leather chair across from his desk, her hands gripping the armrests. "What do you mean, complicated?" David opened the drawer and pulled out the envelope. "I think you should read it yourself." "But Emma, I want you to know that whatever is in here, it doesn't change anything between us. You're still you. We're still us." Emma's hand trembled as she reached for the papers. "My parents," she whispered. And David wasn't sure if it was a question or a statement. She looked up at him, her green eyes, those distinctive green eyes she shared with 8 strangers, filled with tears. "I think I've always known something wasn't right. The way they would look at me sometimes, like they were seeing someone else. The way Mother would cry on my birthday every year, saying they were happy tears, but they never looked happy." As Emma began to read, David moved around the desk to stand beside her, his hand on her shoulder. Outside, the afternoon sun continued its journey across the sky, indifferent to the small drama unfolding in the study. But inside, the careful architecture of Emma's life was beginning to crack, revealing glimpses of a truth that had been hidden for over 5 decades. The Facebook message came at 2 in the morning, 3 weeks after Emma had first read her DNA results. She had spent those weeks in a fog, alternating between denial and desperate research. David had watched helplessly as she pored over adoption records, fertility clinic histories, and medical journals from the 1,960 seconds and 70 seconds. Now, sitting in the darkness of their bedroom, Emma's phone screen illuminated her tear-stained face. "It's from Sarah," she whispered to David, who immediately sat up beside her. "She says Michael's private investigator found something. They want to meet all of us, tomorrow, in London." The meeting was arranged for a private room at a hotel near King's Cross. David insisted on accompanying Emma, though she had protested she needed to do this alone. As they walked through the hotel lobby, Emma gripped his hand so tightly he thought she might break his fingers. "What if they hate me?" she asked. "What if they think I had it easy, being raised by the people I thought were my parents?" But when Sarah Goldstein opened the door to the conference room, her face so remarkably similar to Emma's broke into a warm smile. "You came," she said simply, and then pulled Emma into a fierce hug. The room was full of people, all sharing variations of the same features. Michael stood by the window, his resemblance to Emma even more pronounced in person. The others introduced themselves one by one. Rachel, Rebecca, David, Jennifer, Paul, and Maria. Michael cleared his throat, calling the room to order. The investigator found our father, he announced without preamble. His name was Dr. Jonathan Rosen. He died in 1987. He pulled up a photograph on his laptop, a distinguished-looking man with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Emma gasped. She had seen those eyes in the mirror every morning of her life. He was a fertility specialist in London from 1965 to 1985, Michael continued. He ran a clinic that promised to help childless couples. What those couples didn't know was that when donor sperm was needed, Dr. Rosen often used his own. The room erupted in voices, anger, disbelief, disgust. But Michael held up his hand. There's more. The investigator found Dr. Rosen's daughter, his legitimate daughter, Hannah. She's 62 and lives in Jerusalem. She knew about us, all of us. A new face appeared on the laptop screen via video call. Hannah Rosen looked exhausted but determined. My father was a complicated man, she began, her accent a mixture of British and Israeli. He genuinely believed he was helping people. He saw himself as giving the gift of life to desperate couples, but he was also an egomaniac who thought his genes were superior. Hannah explained how she had discovered her father's secret when going through his papers after his death. He kept records, detailed records. Over 20 years, he fathered at least 73 children through his clinic. You 9 are just the ones who've taken DNA tests so far. Emma found her voice. 73? The number was incomprehensible. Hannah nodded sadly. He justified it in his journals. He wrote about creating a legacy, about spreading intelligence and good health. He was brilliant, a genuine medical pioneer in many ways, but he was also deeply unethical. When regulations started tightening in the early 80s, he destroyed most of his records and retired. He died of a heart attack 2 years later. What about our mothers? Rebecca asked. Did they know? Most didn't, Hannah replied. The few who suspected were told the donor was someone who matched their husband's characteristics. My father was very careful. He chose couples who were desperate, often older, who wouldn't ask too many questions. Emma thought about Margaret and Thomas Whitfield, honest, straightforward people who had wanted a child so badly. They had probably never imagined the truth. My parents were good people, she said suddenly. Whatever they knew or didn't know, they loved me. They were my parents. The room fell silent. Sarah reached over and took Emma's hand. Nobody's saying they weren't. We all had different experiences. Some of us had wonderful parents. Some didn't, but we're connected now, whether we like it or not. The conversation continued for hours. They shared stories, medical histories, and photographs. Despite the shocking circumstances of their conception, bonds began to form. Rachel was a teacher, like Emma's daughter Sophie. David was in finance, like Emma's husband. They discovered shared talents. Several were musically gifted. Most were academically successful. Dr. Rosen's narcissistic belief in his superior genes had at least resulted in accomplished children. As the meeting drew to a close, Michael stood up. I propose we stay in touch. Not because we have to, but because we choose to. We didn't ask for this connection, but it exists. We can make something positive from it. On the train ride home, Emma leaned against David's shoulder, emotionally exhausted. I don't know who I am anymore, she confessed. David kissed the top of her head. You're the same person you were this morning. You're the woman I married. Sophie's mother. A successful designer. A terrible cook. A wonderful gardener. And apparently, someone with a lot more siblings than we thought. None of that changes the fundamental you. How are we going to tell Sophie? Emma asked. She's going to have dozens of aunts and uncles she never knew about. She's also going to have cousins, David pointed out. Sarah mentioned she has 2 kids. Michael has 3. Sophie always wished for a bigger family. Over the following months, Emma slowly integrated this new reality into her life. She attended some gatherings with her half-siblings, forming particularly close bonds with Sarah and Rachel. They created a support group for others who had discovered similar situations. The fertility industry of the 60s and 70s had more than one unethical practitioner. The hardest part was reconciling her feelings about Dr. Rosen. She couldn't bring herself to call him her father. Thomas Whitfield had been her father in every way that mattered. But she couldn't deny the genetic legacy he had left her, not just the green eyes and musical ability, but also the intelligence and determination that had helped her build her business. Hannah visited London 6 months later, bringing with her photo albums and documents she had saved. Over tea in Emma's garden, surrounded by the roses she had inherited from the woman she still called mother, Hannah shared stories about Jonathan Rosen, his brilliance, his arrogance, his genuine desire to help infertile couples, and his complete inability to see the ethical boundaries he was crossing. "He would have liked you," Hannah said quietly. "All of you." In his twisted way, he thought of you as his children. He kept newspaper clippings whenever one of you appeared in local papers, honor rolls, wedding announcements, business successes. He was proud, even if he had no right to be. Emma looked around her garden, at the life she had built with David, at the photos of Sophie on the garden table. Her phone buzzed with a message from the siblings group chat, Paul, sharing pictures from his son's graduation. Her family had expanded in ways she never could have imagined. Complicated, and messy, and strange, but somehow fitting together. "I forgive them all," Emma said suddenly, surprising herself. "My parents for keeping the secret, Dr. Rosen for his arrogance, even myself for not seeing the truth earlier. Holding on to anger won't change the past." That evening, as David helped her prepare dinner for Sophie's visit, Emma felt a strange sense of peace. The truth had been shocking, life-altering, and painful, but it had also opened doors she didn't know existed. In seeking answers about her past, she had found a future filled with connections she never expected. When Sophie arrived, bubbling with stories from her work week, Emma and David exchanged glances. They had agreed to tell her everything, but not tonight. Tonight was for normal family dinner, for complaints about traffic and discussions about weekend plans. The rest of the story, the DNA test that had changed everything, the siblings scattered across the country, the grandfather who had seen himself as a genetic benefactor, could wait. As they sat around the dinner table, David raised his glass. "To family," he said, looking meaningfully at Emma. "In all its forms." Emma smiled, thinking of Sarah and Michael and all the others, of Hannah in Jerusalem, even of Dr. Jonathan Rosen, whose choices had created this strange web of connections. "To family," she agreed, and meant it in ways she never had before.